A thing that I find very fascinating about One Piece is the way it portrays morality compared to other mangas. Especially in shonen manga, despite the obvious efforts of some authors, there is a clear line between good and evil. And even characters that are meant to be in a morally grey zone usually end up on one end of the spectrum sooner or later. The decisive factor for this are often the moral values these characters hold, and most fights are based on clashes between morally good and morally bad ideologies. A reliable example for this might be Boku no Hero Academia. The manga is based on the conflict between heroes that are trying to protect their good values and the villains who follow their own twisted and bad ideologies. What stands out at the center of such storytelling is the clear opposition of good and evil in the individual convictions of characters, the ultimate display of this being the fight of All Might against All for One. Such stories make it relatively easy and clear to pick which side is the morally right and which is the morally wrong. But while there are many mangas of this kind that you can easily consider as great, One Piece does something different, even if it feels slightly counterintuitive at first glance. From the back of your head, it surely enough feels like the story is also built upon a conflict of good versus bad ideologies. But if I told you to take a moment and come up with a character that holds purely evil values, in the sense that their goal is actually to do evil, how many characters could you actually come up with? There's actually a strong argument that this number would actually be very close to zero. Because in fact, the One Piece world does not have a Voldemort or Sauron that seek dominion over all. And now you might think, well, what about Blackbeard? But what actually is his ideology? Simple. Blackbeard values and aims for the exact same thing as our main character, Luffy. Freedom. And freedom in itself surely is not a concept that most people would deem as morally wrong. In fact, all major players in One Piece hold ideals that cannot be put into two categories like wrong or good by themselves. Luffy and Blackbeard prize freedom above all else. The Marines value order and justice, and Whitebeard values family. None of these ideals are fundamentally evil, but they still come into conflict with each other. Now, what I'm describing here is the concept of moral pluralism. Basically, it says that people aren't simply good or bad based on the ideals they hold, and that different ideologies can morally be acceptable and still contradict each other. This applies to our world as well, where we often tend to look down on people who share opposite views and ideals than us and mark them as bad and ignorant right from the start. This view of morality is what makes One Piece so different from many other stories. Now, based on this, it might make you wonder if the argument here is that there's actually no good or no evil in One Piece. But that's not the case. In fact, not seeing someone like Blackbeard or Akainu as evil would render the whole plot of the story meaningless. So the argument here much rather is that Oda's understanding of good and evil is not based on values and ideals, but rather on something different. To illustrate this, let's look at a few examples. The Marines in general value order and justice. This ideology is interpreted very differently by very different people. While the likes of Garp and Sengoku see it as their duty to protect the innocent and the weak by being gentle and respectful and trying to be genuine even in the treatment of their enemies, Akainu and Lucci slaughter and destroy knowledge in order to keep the very same ideal. Both the Whitebeard pirates and the Don Quixote pirates value family over everything. But while Whitebeard views all of his crew equally as his children and will go to any length to protect them, Doflamingo gave a kind of hierarchy to his subordinates, and while he sees them as family, he also sees it as his right to make use of them to his benefit. Lastly, let's take a look at Luffy and Blackbeard. Both follow the ideologies of freedom and dreams. Both have a very similar crew, and yet Luffy wants to share this dream with his crew and help those in need, while Blackbeard uses these ideals as a justification to murder his own crewmate and slaughter his way through the Grand Line with the worst people imaginable. As such, it is not a coincidence that there are so many parallels between the two characters. Now, what these examples should help illustrate is that good or evil do not come from values that people hold, but rather from the way they interpret and act upon them. The way you affect those around you by trying to reach your ideals is what really determines the morality of a person to Oda. This is what makes Blackbeard such a unique villain, and what makes One Piece such a fascinating story compared to other mangas. Now, I would like to hear your opinion on this matter. What do you think makes a character good or bad? And are there characters with truly evil ideals in One Piece? And what do you think, for example, about Kaido? Is his ideal and goal revenge? Is it death? And would that be morally wrong to strive for? Share your thoughts on this admittedly very philosophical topic in the comments below. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to be notified for any future content of mine. Or dislike, don't share and unsubscribe. It's a free world, people. I hope to see you around next time, and until then, have a great week.